we're doing this.
No, you're good. Listen. This is you ever watch like the real podcasters? Like I'm not a real podcaster. Let me just be honest, though, Colin. I've been trying to fake the funk for 4 or 5 years now, and I
Yeah.
just kind of do it the way I do it. So
Hey,
if I break any rules, let me know.
If everybody, no, you've been doing it longer than I have. But if everybody did it the exact same way, there would be no variation, and so there would be no interest in any of it. So the fact that it may be your own style is one thing that makes it wonderful.
It is true, and I have the red Solo cup to prove it. I've been living a life of sobriety, but I go on the road, right? And I always have these sound issues. We're just doing sound checks and everything, and like I can't tech. I'm not tech, right? And so I put this over here, and sometimes it sounds, but it's more about how they've noticed me to have this red Solo cup. So we're rocking. Colin, I want to say thank you, and what an honor to get a chance to meet you. I want to hear about the blue collar, because let me set this up, folks, so you understand. You're on the Prayed Up Network, and we are the Be Better podcast. And I have shared my journey of my walk with Christ right here with all of my family, my community, and beyond. And I'm just honored anytime I have a chance to hear other people's testimonies. And so I want to hear how you've become who you are and really get to know your story. And let's just have a fun conversation. So, Colin, why don't you introduce yourself to me and the rest of the world here in our at least our world. It's a very small world, but go ahead.
So I'm gonna have to say this up front. I usually go by BC Preacher, which is blue collar preacher, but so I probably need to change my little
Do you not use your real name?
No, I do most of the time, obviously, but
I didn't know maybe you had an alias and maybe there was a wanted poster at the post office for you. So I don't know.
Well, the only reason I said you were saying Pastor Blue Collar, and so obviously that pointed out something that I didn't even think of, that people would use that as a title. So thank you for that. But my name is Colin Dillard. I am a pastor in Oklahoma City. I handle the college and career group, and I'm under the tutelage of a pastor who's been doing it for 45 years. And so I'm learning from him as much as I can as I move forward, because I've only been doing this. I've only been an ordained minister for about 2 years now. Got a late start. Even though God called me into ministry whenever I was 10 years old, I grew up in church. Much like, millions of other people, I grew up in church, and so I was surrounded by it. I went to drug church, meaning I was drugged to church every time the doors were open. So, but the problem is that living this life of being in church, and that was my social circle. That was my social life, was church. It wasn't a belief system. It wasn't a philosophy for me. It was just, this is what people in America do. They go to church and socialize with one another. So it was much more a social club than a refinement center, technically. And yes, I am blue collar. I am a production manager for a company called Outback Customs that does the interiors for like horse trailers and things like that. And I handle the finish shop, where we put all the finish on all the trailers, or on all the woodwork. And so I guess you could say I'm kind of doing the tent maker style of things, as Paul did. But growing up in a Christian environment, my parents were both devout believers. And growing up in that environment and constantly having the Bible, I wouldn't change it for anything, because it's laid the groundwork for later on God to really have to do his work in my spirit. And had that groundwork not been laid, I don't know how long it would have taken me to get to where I am now. But because that groundwork was laid, that the seed was planted over and over, and it was cultivated over and over again, and God's word does not return void. Because of that, I was able to get right to work once he really got a hold of my heart, once he really got a hold of me. And the story of that really begins, like I said, whenever I was 10 years old. He called me into ministry, And I got scared from that. I was like, I don't know what that means. How does that line up with what I want to do? And like most teenagers, was more concerned with what my friends thought, with what society thought, and what I wanted to do, my
Mhm.
interests and my desires, and not God's desires. And so I started to chase after my own interests, which usually lined up with women or with girls at that age. And with popularity and things like that, even though I was never popular because I was too much of a nerd. Um, but after high school, whenever I got started going into the college scene, people started asking me questions that I didn't know the answer to because, yeah, sure, I had been taught the Bible, but people started asking me questions, and I started asking myself questions that I didn't know how to answer or where to find the answers, even though it was in the Bible and it was in prayer the whole time. I didn't turn to the Bible. I turned to society. I turned to culture. I turned to the school because they're the ones who have the answers. And it led me away from God.
Mhm.
And uh, so I became less and less interested in maintaining. I became less and less interested in maintaining a relationship with God.
Mhm.
It still kind of remained there under the surface. But then in 2007, I've been graduated a couple years at this point. Every year, my family would go and do fireworks shows professionally for cities in Yukon or cities in Oklahoma. And on July 7th of 2007, was supposed to be the luckiest day of the millennium, there was an accident, and my brother and my sister both ended up in the hospital. They were burned. There was an explosion. They were burned head to toe.
Oh,
Um, 2 weeks after that, due to complications, my sister died
oh,
in the hospital. And then 2 weeks after that, my brother passed away. Same thing, complications.
oh.
Um,
I'm sorry.
so yeah. So and I was there. I witnessed it. The only thing that I can think that is comparable to seeing the things that I saw is an IED. That's really the only thing that's comparable because we are talking about high explosives in a confined environment that creates a very, I mean, it was colorful, but it was still incredibly deadly. And
Mm.
so the fact that they even lived for a couple weeks, that my sister even lived for a couple weeks, as badly burned as she was, is a miracle in and of itself.
Were they conscious, Colin, at all? Did they come to consciousness during that couple weeks, or?
My sister did not. My brother did a couple times. They were able to they kept them in a medically induced coma because it wasn't just their skin that got burned. It was also the inside of their lungs because they
Oh.
breathed in all these chemicals that are used in the making of these fireworks. And
Mhm.
so my sister only had one good lung. The other one was completely burned on
Okay.
the inside. So
Okay.
she was only operating on one good lung. And actually, what happened is they had her on dialysis because, I mean, when your system is that overloaded with injuries, you try to clean the blood as much as you can because your liver can only do so much.
Mhm.
And so they had her on dialysis, and she got a blood clot on the end of the needle, and that whenever they removed the needle to change out the system, that blood clot traveled to her one good lung and she suffocated.
Oh,
Yeah. Um,
wow.
yeah. And my brother died to an infectious disease in the hospital that had gone under the radar for weeks, and then all of a sudden it shut down all of his vital organs at the same time. These are both rare complications that happen in the hospital when you experience those kinds of injuries.
Mhm.
So they're rare. They're both rare, but they do happen. Um, so it's a rarity on top of a rarity. So we're talking 1 in a million chance that they would experience these complications. but they
Colin,
both did.
can I ask you? And I'm not trying to stop the story because this is.
That's okay. Go
I
ahead
didn't
and
know what
ask
direction
questions.
we were going in, and you got me in an emotional,
Yeah.
position where my curiosity is basically, your family was in the business of fireworks, is what
Mhm.
you're saying?
Oh yeah,
And
my
so
dad
how
did it
many?
for 25 years. My dad did
Okay,
fireworks shows.
so all the
So,
kids knew how to do it. This is
oh
something
yeah,
that you guys, yeah.
this was our July 4th. Every year
Okay,
we would go and shoot fireworks shows for, like, say, Chickasha, Oklahoma, or
yeah,
Durant, Oklahoma,
yeah.
or in this case it was Piedmont, Oklahoma. But this was our fireworks show. Everybody else goes out and they pop the little stuff. We popped the big stuff. I'm
Hmm.
talking, fireworks that were as big as my head.
Wow.
Um, so it
Did they
just
ever figure out
depending.
what happened? What I mean, is
Yep.
there? I
OSHA
don't mean to speed you
OSHA
up. I'm sorry. I
Oh,
just,
no, 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 it's okay. It is perfectly okay. I love questions. I love questions because it's an engaging thing. But um OSHA did do an investigation into the fireworks, and they said there was some faulty fireworks due to the um some of the okay, so there's two different types of fireworks. There's the mortar shot, which is
Mhm.
those big ones that you see. Think of the little tube.
Yep.
You know what I'm talking about? Yeah, the
Yep.
little tube, those are called the mortar shots, okay?
Okay.
So we're just talking bigger versions of those.
Okay.
And then there's the cake boxes, which is like those little display ones that do all the little pretty stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, just on a bigger scale, those are called cake boxes.
Okay.
Um, and what had happened is one of the cake boxes had gotten damaged by water on the
Oh,
bottom, and so it had tainted some of the gunpowder in the bottom of the shots. And so whenever this was going off, they were not firing properly. And what
mm,
happened is we stored all of the mortar shots in a metal can, and my sister went to lift up the lid of the metal can, and one of the
mm.
faulty shots went, I think it was roughly about 60 feet, and landed directly into that can. She slammed the lid closed. Those fuses go 75 feet per second, and you can light them by snapping them between your fingers. They are very, very sensitive. So when she slammed that lid shut, she yelled, "Fire in the hole." She hit the ground and it exploded in her face. Whoop. Oh, there we
No,
go.
you're good. You're good. No, you're good. I just, so this explosion that took place,
Hmm.
it went up and came directly down into the box, is what you're saying. This is like,
It was like a little one of those little shell, or like a Roman candle almost,
sure,
like
sure. Okay. Yeah.
a fireball.
Enough to ignite what was in that box. So obviously
Well, it caused a chain reaction. So it lit one, which lit another, and there was 100 of them in there.
oh my gosh.
So in a matter of 2 seconds,
Yeah.
100 fireworks all got lit at the same time. So it was just
Wow.
okay, and it basically turned into this giant explosion that burned both of them. And
Oh,
had I been standing a foot further to my right, I would have gotten hit in the back of the head and been in
oh
the
wait, you were
hospital
there,
by now.
Colin? I'm
Oh
sorry. I
yeah,
didn't even. Oh,
yeah, I was
wow.
there. I saw this, and that's why I said one of the worst things. I would not wish it on my worst enemy. Seeing my sister and my brother and afterwards,
Wow.
because it was like an IED,
Hmm.
a very slow moving IED, but an IED, less explosive, more burning. Um, and so I'm trying to be as PG as
I get
possible
it.
with it.
I understand. Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but yeah, they were burned first, second, third degree burns head to toe. So full thickness burns. That's the full
Was your mom or
technical.
dad there at the event too, or was that like a whole
Yep,
family event? So the
whole
family,
family.
friends, and so this happens when the whole family is together.
Yep, and
Oh
family
my,
friends too. There was about
yeah.
20. I'd say 15 of us all there.
Were you on a
My
bar? Were you out
mom.
in a barge, or were you out in a field, or how were you
We
shooting them off
we
there?
were on the elementary soccer field at the because all the onlookers, all the crowd was in the football stadium, which was
Yeah.
about, I'd say, 1,500 feet, so about a third of a mile. We were about a third of a mile away from them, just to, for safety reasons. For
So nobody knew in
exactly.
the crowd what happened right away. That was just
No, they just saw a really big explosion. They were just like, "Wow!" And it's crazy when you watch the video of people who were taking video, and I don't know if you can find it anymore. I tried to contact the news station to see if I could get it, and they wanted $150 per second. But people were like, wow, look at this pretty display. And then all of a sudden you start hearing people screaming. And because they understood that's not what was supposed to happen. Yeah, so it was a very bad day. And so I spent the next couple weeks, next month in the hospital, basically just in the waiting room, living there, basically. And I was lost spiritually. I mean, I just didn't know what to do.
Can I ask you, did you go basically internalize, say, God, what are you doing? Why did you like to say, were you having some of those kind of questions?
Initially, I ran to God, and then the devil tricked me into thinking, why did God let this happen? So I began to believe the lie that God, well, he I mean, obviously he did still permit it to happen, but I was looking at it through the viewpoint of why did you let this happen to me?
Did you try to place any blame on God? Did we place any blame in the beginning?
Okay. Eventually I started hating God. Yeah.
Well, okay.
But not just for that, because about 2 months later, on my birthday, my dad was killed in a car accident.
Oh.
Yeah, it gets better. I promise it gets better from here.
I got to tell you honestly, I know I didn't.
I'm sorry.
No, I didn't even know, and I'm just so overwhelmed for you. And I know you've gone through this experience, and you're telling the story. It's overwhelming for me, and I'm sure anyone that's watching right now is feeling the same way. This is an incredible story, and so I'm just going to listen. I'm sorry to stop.
You are okay. Like I said, it is okay. I understand that this is difficult for people to hear. It was difficult to live it, so I understand. But my dad died. He got broadsided going through an intersection with my birthday present in the back seat. Which I still have and I still use because it was a bass guitar, and I still play it for worship every Sunday.
Is that the one behind you, or no? That's
that's an electric. The bass is at the church.
Okay.
But so I have that at least.
Wow.
And then this is his flag up here, because he was a veteran.
Wow.
But it was after my dad. Now, of course, in between my brother and my sister, because that was very much a force majeure kind of thing, an act of God. And like I said, OSHA looked into it, and they said it was a 1 in a billion chance that this would have happened.
Just from the moisture under there causing this to do that, and then the reaction.
Just a perfect circumstance.
Wow.
Perfect storm of circumstance. And between that and my dad, I had him as my anchor emotionally. I had my dad, and he kept pointing me to God. And so I was like, okay, I get it. I may not understand it, but God is. But then whenever my dad died, I lost that anchor. As any good parent, as any good father is, he is the anchor for his children, just as God is a good anchor for us. But I lost that anchor, and because I lost that anchor, my relationship with my mom started to, we were never as close as me and my dad were. And so I began to be incredibly isolated. And so I began to believe the lies, and I started asking God, why did you do this to me? Why did you do this to me? Not why did you allow it, but why did you do this to me? And I began to hate God. It started out small, but it grew and it grew and it grew. And I turned to drink, and I turned to sex, and I turned to drugs. Thankfully, I never got addicted to drugs. It didn't really do anything for me in that regard. And I never really went in anywhere beyond.
Did you outwardly, Colin, so this, I'm going to get to share with you sometime personally my thing.
Yeah,
And so I know we all have personal relationships, and our journeys are all different, and the walk is totally different. But did you at
yeah.
all like yell out to God and like say, I'm not coming, I don't trust you, and did you get to that point where you just shut him out,
Um,
or were you just trying to numb it and deal with it? I mean, because
it was
it's a,
just kind of it was well. I mean, obviously, I had some PTSD and depression
sure.
that developed very quickly as a result
Hmm.
of what I had experienced, and uh, over the course of 10 years, it was just a lot of numbing, and that numbing and that depression led me down a very nihilistic path.
Hmm.
Where there was no purpose, there was no meaning. This is all just we are moist robots floating on a blue marble in a meaningless universe. Very much Ecclesiastes chapter 1. Um,
You're a pretty smart guy, huh?
I have my moments. I'll put it.
You know some big words. Mark's
I'm
going to have
sorry.
to text me. Say, no, no, don't be sorry. Keep talking. I'm not trying to be sarcastic. With I'm a
No,
blue
I
collar guy myself over here.
yeah. Um, well, my dad was a literal genius. I mean,
Oh,
but
really?
yeah.
Tell me about your dad. Tell me about your dad, and I want to hear more about your mom, your sister, and your brother too. But what was your dad like? He served in the military.
Yeah,
Um,
he was in the Air Force, and he was, like I said, a genius. And so they had him. Well, he never really told me what exactly he did.
mm,
But it was in a lull time, so there was no major conflict going on.
mhm,
And it was a weird thing because he was in the Air Force, but he wasn't in for very long. I know he was doing a lot of work with like communications and surveillance, so
mhm,
he did learn multiple languages.
mhm.
Um, I think Polish was one of them. I'm not sure why he learned Polish, but he did learn Polish.
Well, he must have
Uh,
been dealing with something over on that side of the world. We get it. I got it.
exactly,
Yeah, yeah, I got
exactly.
it. Yeah.
But it was weird because he got out on a medical discharge, but the circumstances surrounding, because they were going to send him into a cold environment. And so they wanted to see how he would do with the cold. So they stuck him in a freezer, and he developed hives all over his body from being in the cold.
Yeah.
And they pulled him out. The hives went away. They put him back in. The hives came back, and they pulled him back out again. And they said, "Well, we can't really use you if you're going to react like this to cold. So we're going to have to medically discharge you." And anytime he was ever in the cold again, it never happened again.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah. So
I mean, I'm sure being up in the North Pole all by yourself in a room wouldn't have been fun, anyways. But
no, probably
that
not.
would have.
That or that or on the edge of Siberia.
Yeah, exactly.
Um,
Yeah.
um,
We have no knowledge of any undercover operations, by the way. Colin's not mentioning anything.
exactly,
Yeah, yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
I can neither confirm nor deny any activity.
Hmm.
Um, but he left. He left the military, and he went and started a business with my uncle. That was started by my grandfather in his garage, and became turned it into a multinational corporation that handled security for big name retail stores like Victoria's Secret, Bath and Body Works. They handle
Okay.
all of their ingress and egress security,
Hmm.
locks, entry devices, RFID systems, all that kind of jazz.
Okay.
And they built that from the ground up. And have you seen the quick set where you can the new quick set locks where you can insert a tool and
Hmm.
change the key,
I think I've
where you
covered.
where
So
you can
okay,
rekey a
okay,
lock?
yep.
Yeah. Well, that was actually my grandfather's design.
So was that a patent that they put
Yes.
together? Oh
The
wow. Okay.
patent ran out a few years
Okay.
back, and that's why their Quickset was able to pick it up.
Gotcha. Okay.
But he did develop that. My grandfather did, and my
Hmm.
dad refined it because again, he was the genius, and he built he basically built this production system, or this production factory, to build these locks from the ground up.
Wow.
And
That must have been interesting, though. Did you guys grow up in the factory? Did you guys
it was a machinist factory, so it was actually very clean.
Yeah.
But I grew up in that blue collar environment. My dad was a COO, but he was definitely very hands on. So he handled all the operations. So I was very familiar with that environment, and I loved it.
Okay.
Where was it going?
I interrupt you. I'm sorry.
That's
I was
okay.
curious.
It's okay.
Yeah, you're just talking about your dad and the business and of course the locks, where they were your grandfather.
He built
had,
it. He built it from the ground up.
Mm-hmm.
But he grew up in a household my grandfather started the church that I grew up in, but he was very much the one way in public, one way at home kind of man. My grandfather.
Okay.
He was abusive towards my grandmother and towards my dad and my uncle.
Okay.
So he put on a good face, but he was not a good man at home. And so my dad grew up in an abusive environment, and for the longest time he denied God as well, because his example of a father was a very two-faced and very brutal man.
Was your dad abusive at all during his life?
No, he broke that cycle.
Good.
He broke that cycle. He was never abusive towards me. He refused, because before, my mom is a praying woman. So before me, my brother and my sister were old enough to really ever see anything like that, or experience anything like that, God got a hold of him and changed his life.
Okay.
And brought him into the fold. And my dad played bass for that church for 35 years.
Oh.
Yeah, until he died.
35 years. That he was
35 years, yeah.
He was convinced when he was convinced that he wasn't.
Oh,
he never
yeah.
turned. He never had. Do you think your dad ever second guessed after he?
No. He did not. He would always say there's too much evidence for God. And I obviously now, based on research, based on soul searching, based on miracles, based on things that I've experienced and things that I've seen, I 100% agree. I will never question God ever again. So that happened. My dad died because there's good stuff after this. So I want to get to the good stuff. So after my dad died, I was despondent. Like I said, I went to drink, I went to sex, I went to relationships, trying to find fulfillment.
Were you married, Colin? Did you go through any of that?
I got married, and a couple times in the next 10 years. I got married a couple times, had a couple kids with my second wife, and it got to about beginning of 2019, and my marriage started falling apart. The first one did not end well. The second one was headed down much the same path. And this time I had kids, though. And so that purposelessness, that nihilism, that lack of hope, that hopelessness was growing increasingly strong, and the devil was trying to take me out. And so I was
suicidal.
Yeah. So in the beginning of June, I had started making a plan of taking my life, but looking at it as I want to do it to make it look like an accident so that my kids can get the insurance money. And
were you still drinking, Colin, were you still
oh
drinking
no,
during this
well,
time?
I turned more to the culture of alcohol and
Okay.
less to the alcohol itself. I never became an alcoholic.
Okay.
I was
Hanging out
very,
in the bars with the guys or flirting with
yeah,
girls and
yeah,
telling dirty jokes kind of thing, right?
exactly.
Yeah, gotcha.
Just being there.
Yeah.
Most of the time, I actually ended up being the designated driver whenever I wasn't driving home drunk myself.
Okay.
Um, but so it was in beginning of June of 2019 when I started making a plan.
Mm-hmm.
And it kind of reached a point on June 6th of 2019 at about 11:35 a.m. I will never forget the exact time and day that I had a moment of clarity while I was sitting in my car on lunch at work.
Mm-hmm.
And just the thought of what am I doing
Mm-hmm.
popped through my head. And this moment of clarity that can only be described as the Holy Spirit
Mm.
led me to a prayer where I said, okay, God, I can't do this. I don't know how to do this. I don't
Mm.
want to do this anymore. So I'm giving everything to you, and you do with it what you see fit, because I can't do this anymore. So take it and do with it what you will. And God, in his true and gracious manner, saddled up right next to me and said, that's the best prayer you've prayed in a really long time. I was immediately filled with the Holy Spirit, speaking in tongues, which I hadn't done since I was 10 years old. So it had
Mm.
been 25 years.
Mm-hmm.
And from that moment, I was not the same. Not even close.
Mm-hmm.
So much so that it was strange because, I worked in manufacturing and I fit right in with the crowd. So I cussed like a sailor. And 2 weeks later, I had a Catholic coworker come up to me and say, you know what? I haven't heard you say a cuss word in 2 weeks. I said, really? I didn't even notice. But God made some serious changes instantaneously, and then over the next couple months my depression was gone, my
Mm.
PTSD was gone,
Mm-hmm.
all of the purposelessness was gone, the hopelessness was gone.
Yeah.
All of that, this weight was lifted off of my shoulders. The weight of the world was lifted off of my shoulders. I laid it all down at his
Praise
feet, just as
Jesus.
he said, cast your cares, or come
Amazing.
to me, all who are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you, for my yoke is easy and my burden is light. And
Um,
I felt light as a feather. And my
you're good.
it,
Yep.
it was it was interesting because my marriage continued to fall apart, but for a very different reason now.
Okay.
Because I was it was initially because I was just hopeless, I was depressed, I just couldn't fulfill the role of being a husband and being a
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
father because I was just so dark. Things were just so dark.
Mm-hmm.
Now I was sprinting towards God as fast as I could,
Mm-hmm.
basically making up 20 years of missing spiritual growth in just weeks and months and a year and years
Mm-hmm.
over the next course of the next few years. And um my wife was not okay with it because it was drastically changing our relationship. Have you ever seen the
Mm-hmm.
relationship triangle whenever it comes to, husband, wife, and God?
Yes.
Well, I was going up, she was
Yeah.
not. And so we
It's
grew further apart as I got closer to God.
it can I just this is all so amazingly. I feel such a connection with you, and
Yeah.
again, we'll share my story. But suicidal. I stopped swearing. I stopped drinking. I stopped looking at porn. I mean, all these things happen, and not just the woman I was with at the time, who's an amazing person, but the people in my life, even some of
Hmm.
my own family members and friends. I had a similar reaction where I was going this way, and they
Hmm.
they couldn't understand, and I couldn't get mad at them. I just didn't understand myself what that journey meant. But
Yeah.
I just want
My
to say
whole
that I'm feeling you when you're saying it.
Yeah, my whole friend group changed over the next 6 months. My entire
Okay.
friend group changed.
Yeah.
Um, and it was rather quickly. I mean, like I just did not want to take part in the things that I was doing before. I wanted no part of it.
Mhm.
Um, so over the course of, the next few months, she moved out, filed for divorce, and we got divorced. And then God really started to set up his divine plan. Here's where it gets good. So, after a while, God told me, I want you to add people on Facebook. I'm like, okay, whatever. I fought it. It kept popping in my head. Add people on Facebook. Okay. Well, I started adding people on Facebook. I added, like 100 people. Just adding people who had a lot of mutual friends with. And one of the people that I added was this woman that I didn't know. I had never met her before. Didn't I had no clue who she was.
Mhm.
And she had no clue who I was.
Mhm.
But she went to church she went to a church where the pastor was one of my brother's best friends growing up. And
Oh
so I
wow.
knew him really well.
Okay.
So because I was friends with her pastor on Facebook, we became friends on Facebook, or at least she popped up in my mutual and I added.
Mhm.
Again, I was just boom, 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 adding people.
Mhm.
And about 3 months after I added her, she accepted the friend request and messaged me and said, "Hey, I noticed that you know a lot of people at this church. Do you go to this church?" I said, "No, but I know the pastor." She thought I was lying. It was
Mhm.
hilarious. Um, she actually thought I was lying about that for quite a while until
Okay.
we ran into the pastor in just in a natural environment, the soccer game, and I gave him a big old hug because I hadn't
Mhm.
seen him in years. And she's like, "Okay, he wasn't lying." Um, but we met, we talked, we became friends, everything like that. And after a while, we started dating,
Mhm.
and I got scared. In all honesty, I got scared because I was like, okay, this has got to be me just trying to fill the void of a woman in my life because
Mhm.
it's so soon after that. And I got scared. I said, okay, I need to take a step back. I need a couple weeks. I prayed and I prayed, and she prayed and she prayed because she was upset too. And she saw that there was a preacher coming to my church to do a service, to preach at a service,
Mhm.
and she knew this preacher, and so she messaged me after a couple weeks of not talking. She messaged me and said, "Hey, can I come? Would it be weird if I came to your church and came to listen to this preacher?" And I said, and me being who I am at that point, I said, I'm never going to tell somebody, no, you can't go to church.
Uh-huh.
So I was like, okay, yeah, go ahead and go to church. It might be a little awkward, but I'm never going to tell somebody you can't go. And I still hold true to that. I'm never going to tell somebody you can't go to church. So I show up late because I was at a previous function that I had already planned. And lo and behold, she's sitting in the seat right next to where I always sit at church.
And you didn't coordinate it. It just
Did
happened.
not, we came in at different times. She was already there whenever I got there, but she was sitting in
Mhm.
the seat right next to where I always sat.
Somebody's playing matchmaker.
Oh, it gets even better. Then the preacher calls her up front and says, "You've been looking for love, a true godly love, for a long time.
Mhm.
The struggle is over." And I was like, okay, God, I'm still not sure this is you, because at this point I'm
Wait, wait.
still
He's
of a,
talking to her though in
he's
church,
talking
right?
to her in
And
church.
you're
Yes.
you're sitting out there going, "Am I part of this
Well,
equation?"
that's what
Right?
I was saying. Okay, God, I don't
All right.
know if this is you. I don't know if this is me.
Right. Yeah.
What's going on here? It could be because at that point I'm still of the mind, okay, there are such things as coincidence. And because everybody who's not really a believer understands or believes that there is
Hmm.
such a thing as coincidence, but those who truly believe understand that God works all things together for the good of those who love him and for his glory.
Yes.
So there really is no such thing as coincidence, because it's all orchestrated by a God who is outside of time, space, and matter.
Yeah, I'm smiling because lucky is like how many of us think, "Oh, we're going to scratch off the
Exactly.
winning ticket. We're
There's no
lucky."
such thing as luck.
Luck does not
Yeah,
exist in the world. I
exactly.
1,000% am proof of that. So
Yeah. Well, and I am too. So
yeah.
it gets even better.
Okay.
So after this, I she came over to my house and met my children, and
Oh,
I wasn't really planning. I just felt like I needed to see how they would react to her, and they
of
were
course.
very small at this time. One was just about to turn 2, and one had just turned 5,
Okay.
and they glommed onto her.
Hmm.
I had never seen them react like this with anyone, and they just immediately glommed onto her. And
For the folks out there on my level, that's grabbed onto, right? Just kind of,
sorry, well,
yeah.
they just immediately
Sorry, I love it,
they
man. Keep throwing the words out there. I'm learning new words from you every day. So
they immediately received her
I got
as
you.
yeah,
Yeah,
and just showered her with love.
that's
And I
beautiful,
was
right?
like,
And you must
yeah,
have been
it was
like,
gorgeous.
wow.
Yeah, I was baffled by this. And then
Were you pushing back on it at all? Did you feel like this is too
yes,
fast? And
yes,
okay,
yes,
yep,
absolutely. I was still
okay.
pushing back on it. So a couple weeks go by. We're talking again, but I'm not really like, I'm still kind of on the fence, but I'm like, I don't know if this is supposed to be me or if this is supposed to be some other guy and I'm actually in the way.
Hmm.
Um and then I finally I've been praying about it and been praying about it and been praying about it, and I was like, okay, well, we'll start dating. And we date for a while, and then a few months go by, and then she says, "Hey, I want to show you something." And she shows me this journal where where God had told her that she needed to start writing letters and prayers and praying for her future husband. And
Hmm.
she wrote down these prayers, wrote down these letters. And I felt a cold chill, a good one, but a cold chill go down my spine,
Hmm.
because the very first letter that she wrote was on June 6th of 2019, the same day that God got a hold of me. And the things that she prayed over in that letter, in that prayer, were exactly the same things that I was dealing with at that time, a year or a year and a half prior. And we didn't know each other then.
She couldn't have known about you having that same
There's no
day be
way she could
important.
have
You
known.
could June 2019 was specific for you, but it also on paper or the document she put down, right? This
Hmm.
this uh this document, it actually had June 6th, 2019.
Yeah, she had dated it as June 6th of 2019.
That,
It
that
was in
that's
this.
that's you got to be now. You're like, are we
At,
where are we going on our honeymoon?
at that point, I was convinced.
Yeah,
At
wow,
that
that's
point,
amazing.
at that point, everything, it's like my entire life, the good
Hmm.
and the bad, all of it just clicked into place.
Oh yeah.
Like I put the last piece in the puzzle, and it all just made sense.
Hmm.
Every last bit of it, the good, the bad, the dark, the beautiful, all of it made sense at that moment.
Hmm. Hmm.
Because like I said, I got that cold chill down my back, and
Yeah.
like you said, at that moment, I was like, okay, well, I know what we're doing.
Yeah.
And so over the
Yeah.
course of the next year,
Yeah.
year and a half, we continued to date. We got to know each other. I was at that point, I was courting her, obviously.
Mhm.
Um, but we were in preparation for that, but we we took things slow because it was going to be a blended family. She had a kid, I had two kids, she had an ex to deal with.
Is there an age difference in you guys?
I am 346 days older than her.
Oh, okay, all right, yeah, less than a year. So
Yeah,
that's cool.
her birthday
By
is
one day.
yeah. Well, there's an 18-day difference, I think. Yeah.
Okay, all right,
So,
yeah.
there's an 18-day difference between our birthdays, but
I
I'm
understand.
almost a year older.
That's crazy.
Um,
Yeah.
so, but yeah, at that point, because of those things, God immediately settled in my mind the idea of coincidence. He completely settled it in my mind. And he had to do that. He had to break that stronghold of doubt in my mind in order for me to fully move on. And while we were doing this, and one thing I forgot to mention, that God's providence in my life, not just relationally but spiritually, I was going to the church that I told you about that my family started, that my dad played bass at, but I wanted to serve. I wanted to find a place that I could serve, but there was a lot of baggage at that church because I was in and out of that church all the time, and so they wouldn't necessarily take it seriously if I all of a sudden was like, okay, I'm gonna, I want to serve. Not to mention they were stacked deep with people to serve. And so I was like, God, give me a place where I can serve, where I can actually contribute, where I can be a contribution. And a couple of weeks later, I get a call from an old friend of mine who's the children's pastor at this church and says, hey, they're looking for somebody who can help sing and play bass for worship. And I said, okay, all right, let's go check it out. Spirit-filled message, challenged me spiritually, great altar time, loved it. It's definitely not a big church, like modernity kind of thing. The pastor is 70 years old, but so it's a little old school, but the spirit was there, and that's all that matters. So after a couple weeks of debating back and forth of not wanting to move out of my comfort zone, but then God telling me you need to move out of your comfort zone, you need to just go, I decided to go. And at the same time that I had been praying for God to give me a place where I can serve, I said, okay, God, I know you've called me into ministry. I know you've called me to be a pastor and to be a preacher, but I can't afford to just uproot everything and go to seminary. I've got kids to pay for. I've got a house to deal with. I need to have a job and work. But I also need to follow your footsteps. Well, it turns out that about a couple weeks after I had committed myself to going to this church, I learned that the pastor set up a Bible college, and he ordained ministers through this Bible college for free.
Oh, wow.
And so I became an ordained minister over the course of the next 3 years. 2.5 years. Over the course of the next 2.5 years, I became an ordained minister. And now, like I said, I'm the college and career pastor at that church.
Amazing. And so this story, which really started out with the experience that you went through with your brother and your sister, and then of course your father passing, has a lot of hurt involved in it.
Oh yeah.
But God didn't let go of you, and so you didn't let go of God either, which is important to understand. That we get into these moments, and I experience it myself, and I think you're really just echoing a lot of things that really resonate with me, and I think a lot of people listening as well. That God has that plan, and you got to trust in that plan, and when that time comes, you're going to be sitting in a church next to your future. And your future is going to be something you don't even know or even put together. It's
would not have chosen her out of a crowd. She would not have chosen me out of a crowd.
Would you then even thought you were going to be a minister though? You didn't even have that. I mean, that's what I'm saying. These are things that took place.
No, it was actually after I got saved that it was brought to remembrance that God had actually called me into ministry, because I had forgotten about it.
Talk about getting saved. I want to hear about that part. Yeah.
Well, like I said, I mean, that that's whenever I really got saved. Like I said, I had lived the social life of being a
Yep.
Christian, and
Yep.
I went to church to not feel guilty, and because that was what was familiar. But
Yeah.
it
Paying
was,
on Sundays, right? Dropping in the bucket on Sundays. If
yeah,
you, I mean, so
checking the
yep.
box.
Yep.
I did that for years,
Mm-hmm.
decades. So it wasn't until 2019 that I truly got saved.
Wow.
It wasn't until whenever I was at the bottom of the barrel
Mm-hmm.
and the devil was about to destroy me. It wasn't until I got there,
Did she
until I
come in your
saw.
life at the right time? In other words, were you at that depression point and suicidal and feeling all
Oh
these
no,
things?
that was gone.
It was
Or it
gone.
was,
You've
yeah, that was
cleared that
gone
up.
by the
Okay,
time. Yeah,
good.
no.
Awesome.
So I didn't meet her until I didn't even meet her until 6 months after I'd gotten saved, and God had done this
Because your
massive
ex-wife had
transformation.
left you, right? When you got saved,
Yeah,
you left,
yeah.
your ex-wife left you. And so you went through, but did you struggle a little bit after your ex-wife left you, or did you say, God's got a plan and I believe it? Was that really
Oh
your,
no, I there was definitely some vacillation there, but there was
okay. Yeah.
definitely some uncertainty and
Hard
doubts,
days.
because the hardest, when you really sell yourself out to God,
Mhm.
that it's a spiritual battle, and whenever you sell yourself out to God, you're a threat. Once
Mhm.
you become a threat, the devil's going to do everything he can to try
Exactly,
and
man.
stop it. So
Devil's trying to take you out at every turn.
yeah, the worst time in a Christian's life,
Mhm.
the worst time in a Christian's life is the first is immediately following salvation.
Mhm. Understood.
It's the immediately following, because you're a dead man in the field of no man's land before
Mhm.
that.
Mhm.
It's whenever God quickens that spirit inside you that you stand up. Now the devil recognizes that you're there. I need to tamp that down. I need to push that down. I need to kill that. It needs to die. So he's going to do everything he can to turn you into, in the parable of Jesus, whenever he talks about the parable of the sower, he wants to do everything he can to turn you into the seed that sprouts but then dies whenever it faces adversity.
Mhm. Mhm.
Or he wants to, if he can't kill you that way, he wants to turn you into the seed that is sprouted but then is choked out by the thorns, the concerns of the world.
Mhm.
If he can do either one of those, then you never turn into the 30 or the 60 or the 100-fold Christian that just brings people into God's presence
Right.
and into salvation. So that, if he can do that, then you're no longer a threat. He's got you right where he wants you. Yeah, you're saved, so he lost one soul, but you're not taking anybody with you.
Right.
So every person who becomes saved, everyone who sells themselves, who crucifies their flesh and becomes one with Christ, they will face that adversity for the first, week, 2 weeks, 2 months, 6 months, however long the devil thinks he can actually try and convince you that God's not there, and that this is all fake and this is all just in your imagination. And yeah, he tried to do that. But like I said, as soon as I saw that book, all doubt was removed. Every last bit of it was removed. And so
Yeah, we're changing up a little bit of the scene here. I like to move the
yeah,
screen around, so I think I'm
that's
confused. I
okay.
should have warned you. But your
That's okay.
story, where you're at in your story right now, the way that you're so passionately telling this, I mean, and you did it in a very quick version. And I apologize that if
Okay.
I made you, kind of
No.
force it out, but just the tragedy to the experience, the running away, and then
Hmm.
eventually finding your way into Christ, and really finding that. So, and what's amazing is there's a lot of similarities to people that I speak to, like yourself. I think, Colin, there's a lot of people that have the experience when they were younger, kind
Hmm.
of walked away, thought they could live in the real world, and then found their way back one day. And usually it's after some tragedies that have taken place, and you wonder how much that devil just try, to your point what you're making now, the devil is constantly there just swinging, right?
Well, it's not just that, but there's also some truth in understanding the darkness.
Okay.
For example, I've used this example before, but if you think about the woman who washed Jesus's feet with her hair,
Hmm.
she was in the house of a Pharisee when she did this,
Mm-hmm.
and Simon the Pharisee knew this woman and knew what her life was like before, and he said if Jesus knew who she was, he would not let her do this. And he said, she has been given for much. She has been forgiven much. So she loves much. You have been forgiven little, and so you love little.
Mm-hmm.
When you truly understand how dark things can be without God, that's whenever you truly understand how bright his light really is.
So good. So good. My pastor just touched on that a couple weeks ago back in church. So
Yeah.
it's just resonating now. So what's it feel like? So I asked this question. I know I have my answer, and I just my opportunity to hear yours.
Mm-hmm.
What does God's love feel like to you? Like if you were giving me a description, what's that love feel like to you?
Well, I relate it to my kids all the time. I relate it to how to what I feel towards my kids, and I relate that to how God feels about me and about everyone else. Is that we want the best for our kids, but we also know that they have to choose it, and so we can try to convince them. We try to convince them. We try to push them in the right direction. We try to get them to go where they need to go to avoid the pitfalls that we've made, or to avoid the pitfalls that we see coming. But we still have to let them do it. And we still have to let them choose the right path. And we can hope that they choose the right path. Now, God has the ability to force us to choose the right path, but because he loves us and because he wants our love, he can't force it. Otherwise, there is no love. Love cannot be compelled. Love is a choice. It is not a compulsion. It is not a feeling. It is not an emotion. It is a choice. Whenever you get married, you choose to love your wife.
Mm-hmm.
Whenever you have children, you choose to love your children. Now, it's a lot easier to choose to love your children because they are of you.
Mm-hmm.
But you still make the choice, because there are many people, unfortunately, who do not make that choice to love their children more than themselves. And God loved the world so much that he was willing to sacrifice in all reality a part of himself, to give up a part of himself to save his children.
Amazing. And
So
your love for God, was it always in? Did you always know you had that love for God? Because I think a lot of people too, especially in this, I think there's a new generation of God just putting energy into people, and a lot of people feel like that I speak to, Colin, that they've had love in their heart, they've had God love, but they just didn't know how to translate that language into their lives. So
well,
did you
and
always feel it like you had it?
well, the
Is that
way I
do you
put,
understand the question? Maybe
yeah,
I'm
no,
sorry if I'm confusing.
no, and I understand the love of God is a very difficult thing to express and to comprehend because it's
Right.
unconditional, and we being such conditional creatures find it very difficult to express and to relay an
Hmm.
unconditional type of love. It
Hmm.
becomes significantly easier whenever we become parents because we understand more of the idea of what it means to be unconditionally
I
loving.
agree.
However, I do want to say that even whenever the opposite of love is not hate.
Hmm.
So whenever I hated God, I still had a recognition of God. I still there, because the opposite of love is not hate. The opposite of love is indifference. If I'm indifferent towards God,
Hmm.
that's the opposite of love. If
Okay.
I'm indifferent towards my children, that's the opposite of love. Because if I can feel a strong emotion towards someone, then there is some form of love. Now, it
Hmm.
may be tainted by hatred, but it is still some form of love.
Hmm.
You can only not love something that you are indifferent towards, that you could care
Interesting.
less, that
Okay.
you couldn't care less if it existed or not.
That's it. That
So,
empty, dark feeling is that I think that's the hopelessness sometimes that we
mhm.
believe, we start to believe that feeling and that depression and, the suicidal stuff that we've
Mhm.
kind of touched
Well,
on a little bit.
and the absence of love for self is that indifference, and if you
Mhm.
don't care whether you live or die,
Yeah.
you are indifferent towards your own self. So
Right.
it is the opposite of God's love, not just
How
towards
how how
others,
how
but
were you
also
how
yourself.
how were you, how were you gonna do you mind sharing how your plan was if you were to execute the plan? I know we're going in a
Oh,
backwards
yeah.
direction.
So I took the highway to work every day. I took the interstate, and so the plan was to wreck my car at 90 miles an hour and just hope that it killed me
So you were willing to suffer possibly in pain
in
and
order to
and
end it. Yeah.
yeah, it's interesting. Did you want pain? Did you feel like you wanted to hurt yourself and
Oh no,
suffer?
I was hoping that it would just end, that it would just I'd be
Okay.
done. Like not wearing a seatbelt, having the
Right.
window open. Like I'd seen it happen before because it had happened with my dad.
Wow. Wow. That's
So I knew it
thank
was
you for
possible.
sharing that. I
Yeah.
mean, I didn't want to go too far ahead,
Oh
and I
no,
know that,
no, it's fine.
because
It's
it's
fine.
important to understand like the depth of what we experience sometimes. And
Mhm.
some people get upset if I talk about my own experience, and I don't know if you get this reaction. I think it's so important for us to say, this is the reason why we were able to come out of that depression, and those kind of thoughts, they go away when you're
Mhm.
able to
Oh
accept
yeah.
God's love. So
Oh yeah.
yeah.
Well, I mean, you find hope, you find purpose, you find the reason for living. Because
Right.
without God, there is no purpose to any
There's
of
no
this. There is no
exactly.
reason for any of it. There is no meaning because he is the source of all meaning. He is the source of all hope. He is the source of all purpose. So if we don't have him,
Hmm.
the logical end to a godless universe is hopelessness and nihilism. Like I said earlier, we are moist robots who are bound to the proclivities of our primal instincts, floating on a blue marble in a endless and slowly decaying universe. So,
You put that in sort of a nice way and then a kind of depressing way, but I like it. but
it, but I mean, it's the truth though. But
it all is. It
that's
all
the
is.
truth. That's the truth
Yeah.
that even King Solomon came to. Granted, he didn't make a correlation to the universe, but
Hmm.
if you read Ecclesiastes, it's this. This is meaningless. This is meaningless. This is meaningless. This is meaningless. This is meaning like
Hmm.
chapter after chapter of all of these things are meaningless. I pursued women. It was meaningless. I pursued money. It was meaningless. I pursued wealth or fame. It was meaningless. I pursued conquering. It was meaningless. I pursued all of these things and they were all meaningless.
Hmm.
The only thing that brought meaning was God.
I agree. Yeah.
The entire book of Ecclesiastes is a great read whenever you
What's
look
your
at it
What's your
through
favorite
that
book in
lens.
the Bible? What's your favorite? If
Acts
you
of the Apostles,
okay, okay,
because I aspire to do that. I aspire
okay.
to be there.
Go out and serve and do your ministry work in a sense of reaching people.
Mhm,
That's so your story up to this point is so unique and so special,
mhm.
that I don't want to water it down with comparisons. I think every one of us have our own walk.
That's
We yeah.
so
Uh,
no, it's okay to make comparisons because
no,
that's
but
how we experience
well,
the
I want
world.
because but for your experience, for somebody out there, I
Mhm,
think you're going to connect with somebody because I think a
mhm.
lot of us can understand and relate to your story.
Yeah.
Um, the tragedies that you went through, just I just can't even imagine. But the fact that you went through the divorces, the fact that you took this proud moment in your life where you said, "Finally, I get it," right? And even though
Mhm.
I got these things falling apart, at the same time dealing with the depression and suicide, and a lot of people don't understand in this battle when the devil's tugging on you, you're walking, and I can relate to this
Yeah.
so much.
Yeah.
So I really appreciate you kind of putting it in the perspective you did. You end up becoming a minister. Did you okay? Were ministering or becoming a minister with the children or the youth or that next generation? Was that something you thought about, or did it just kind of happen with education?
Um, I was a youth pastor. I was the youth pastor at my church for a while.
Hmm.
I can't talk to kids.
Okay,
I can't do it. Um, I much
that's why
much
you're
like
at the
I'm talking.
that's why college level. You're more of a
college and career. Yeah.
So we need to get them through at least sophomores in high school, maybe the 10th or 11th grade
Now,
to come up.
whenever I initially took over the youth, it was there was a couple seniors
Yep.
and a freshman in
Mhm.
high school. And I could really communicate with them, and they could understand these deeper concepts that I was trying to present and prepare them with, of
Mhm.
what it truly means to follow God. It's not just a set of rules. There's meaning behind all of it,
Mhm.
because a lot of times these kids are not taught. It's basically just glorified babysitting, where we talk about Jesus every once in a while,
Mhm.
unfortunately.
Mhm.
And I was trying to not do that. I was trying to prepare these kids, because they're going to get tossed out into a world that is not going to be friendly, and is becoming
Right.
increasingly less friendly to their beliefs. And if they're not prepared for it, they're going to crumble just like I did.
Right. Right.
And so I was trying to do that, and it was working very well with the older kids. But then
Mhm.
the next generation came through, and they were middle school and
Mhm.
6th, 7th, and 8th grade. And I just I couldn't really take it down to a level where they could understand.
Isn't it nice though? You get that without trying. A lot of people would feel like, "Oh, I'm no good at whatever," but I know I fit. You figured out where you fit, and I think
Yeah,
that's an important part of what you're saying right now. The takeaway for me is you didn't say, "Okay, I can't do it here. I'm actually better at this level with
yeah.
with a little bit of an older student."
Hmm.
Do you think kids today? Um, you think they need more God? I mean, from around. I mean, it's a silly question, but I just feel like
They need to be inundated
yeah, and I
with
like the word
gospel.
inundated. Yeah, just
They
lathered
need
up.
to be just lather it like
Yep.
shampoo. Um, but and the reason why, and the next generation, in all honesty, they're going to be hungry
Mhm.
for something real,
Mhm.
because we live in a world of Snapchat filters, of Facebook, the
Mhm.
Facebook
Yep.
profile, where
Yep.
it's all a facade, or the Facebook facade. That's what I call it,
Yep.
the
I
Facebook
got you. Yep.
facade.
Yep.
And where everything's got a filter, and your news is filtered, your this
Mhm.
is filtered, everything's got some sort of front to it. It's all propagandized in some way.
Right.
Even in personal lives, people present this front that's not real.
Right.
And so AI is another example. It's not real. And so
Mhm.
in a world that is filled with all of these things that are fake,
Mhm.
they're going to be hungry for something that's real. And the only reality is found in Christ. And so when they are presented with it, they will latch onto it quickly, and they will go full force. So I believe that this next upcoming generation is going to be so strong in faith that it's going to be a force to be reckoned with, in all reality, because true faith is born in adversity. And the church of God's church, always triumphs at the gates of hell,
Wow.
and
Yeah.
always thrives at the gates of hell.
So amazing that the words you're using, and some of the I think a lot of folks who are at your level that I get to engage with. And I say level not to segregate or separate. I say more the level of experience that you're comfortable with, because we
Yeah,
all have that level of. I mean, I met the most. I meet non-believers all the time that actually have lots of love for God. They just don't know how to walk. Get over that
yeah.
threshold. And
Hmm.
that's a job for somebody like you. So let me ask you, because you go through this process, and now you start 3 years to become a minister, right? You said it
Hmm.
was 3 years.
Yeah.
Did you ever so where did the blue collar concept, and I just ask because we talked about it earlier on, and it's something you have there. Where did you slap that onto the recipe?
Oh, I was already blue collar, so it was just kind of, I've been in blue collar for 12 years. So I was already a welder. I was already doing manufacturing
Hmm.
work. And so I
Hmm.
just, like, okay, well, I'm a pastor and blue collar, so I'm
Hmm.
both.
Hmm.
Much like Paul was an evangelist, an apostle, and a tent maker. So
Right.
he wore both hats. He just changed the hat every once in a while.
Do you think blue collar? And I just ask you this because words are important, and
Hmm.
the fact that you use those words from your perspective, do you think the blue collar angle, and I don't mean to call it an angle like it's a sort of a ploy or a marketing strategy, but the fact that you were inspired, do you think that population of this country specifically that we live in America is thirsty for that, for God, blue collar wise?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Um, it's well, just statistically speaking, you are more likely to find a Christian in a manufacturing facility than you are at a college.
Right. Right.
Um, so the experience that I had for the short time that I went to college before the accident happened, and my whole life just got derailed.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because I was working on going to school. Well, I was going for film, but initially I was going to go for uh, aeronautical engineering.
Okay.
Um, but then I really liked film, and I'm a little ADHD, so I put my hands in a lot of baskets.
Okay.
Um, but what I experienced at college was, like I said, I started getting asked questions, and I started being confronted by ideas that I didn't have an answer for. I was not
Mm-hmm.
prepared for, and uh, it was because of that the doubt took the stronghold of doubt took place, or took a place in my mind, and it just
Mm-hmm.
grew and festered from there. And then when you
Zach
add the
Zach Williams.
tragedy.
Zach Williams. Doubt is a liar. It's one of my
Hmm.
favorite songs he sings, and that doubting is infectious, isn't it, to others around you too? When you start to feel that doubt, I see some
Hmm.
people that I engage with, when they're doubting, they're actually looking to be supported by a doubting. Almost like
Hmm.
when you go to NA or AA, they're looking for the group of people that commonly think like them. And that often has been the biggest battle, right? Like
Hmm.
breaking that tribal kind of concept.
Yeah. Well, and if you really think about it, the word sin really means to miss the mark.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing we really like to do is, when we miss the mark, we want to be justified in our missing of the mark.
Sure.
So when we doubt, we're missing the mark, and we want to be validated within our missing the mark, so we feel better about ourselves. And whenever we do that, whenever we try to justify, we are thinking too highly of ourselves, and not being humble enough to go to God and say, okay, I was wrong. Right? That's where pride comes in. So if you couple pride and doubt together,
Mm-hmm.
that's where you find that validation within the doubt, and that's where you find the whole seeking to be, where the doubt is infectious, I guess, like you said.
Amazing, because and this is the Be Better podcast that I've evolved to your point, going after money, going after fame, going after all those things. Those things kind of had transitioned in my life, and what I found is I like to talk to people. I'm
Hmm.
good at talking with people, or some
Hmm.
might argue that, but I think the fact is that
Seconded.
thank you. And so, but the fact is that we need more of these conversations, because I know
Hmm.
there's someone out there right now that we're going to reach, that one person. And so,
Hmm.
what would you say to the one person out there that might be on the edge of their seat, listening to this story or hearing it, or maybe seeing this as somebody advises them to listen to your story? What would you say to them about how they could maybe feel a little more comfortable in experiencing the love of God in their lives?
Well, as is true in any relationship, the closer you get to the other person, the more intimate of a relationship you have with them. The more time you spend with them, the better that relationship will be.
Mhm.
Um, so I would say, spend as much time with God as you can, whether that be through reading your Bible, prayer, worship, any of it. Spending quality time with God.
You tee me up
Hmm.
perfectly for the next question.
Okay.
And the next question really is, because I think a lot of Christians, and as a new Christian, and, not a new experience for me in my life, where
Hmm.
this walk took control of me in 2022, December 17th. A lot of people I speak to say, I don't want to go to a church, but I want to
Hmm.
worship God. I don't want to
Hmm.
read a Bible. And I'll be that was me in the beginning. I don't want to read a Bible, but I want to worship God.
I
I,
love this question.
Good. I'm glad you do. You're
Oh, I know
nerding
where
up
you're
on me
going.
a little bit, Colin. You're getting really. But here's it. So you get the root of the question. Like,
Oh yeah,
what do
I know
we
where
need
this
to
is going.
do? And from your perspective, what is that a Christian needs to do? Do I need to have my Bible next to me? Do I need to go into a box, a door, and walk through a
Almost done.
door with a chapel? What do you think?
What's up? Hang on just a second.
No worries.
Okay, I'll take care of it. Give me a few minutes.
Perfect.
Sorry.
No worries.
Um,
So the question is, you get the question.
well, we need to disabuse ourselves of the notion that you have to go to church in order to have church.
And you feel that way because there's so many people that I'm around right now that is supporting that concept.
Well, now going to church is good.
Yep.
But God lives within each of us. His Holy Spirit.
Not just on Sundays. He is here 7 days, 24/7, always there, right?
Well, this is what I talked about. I actually preached this at church on Sunday. I had the opportunity to preach to the whole church. It's like we treat the church like a triage hospital, and it needs to be a place where we go to pour out to God. But because we don't spend any time with God in our personal lives, we end up getting broken throughout the day, and we have to go to church to get repaired. And if we actually spent time with God and we were filled up every single day and repaired every single day in our relationship with God, when we got to church, we would be able to pour out our love in Congress or in the congregation with other believers, and where God even says, where two or more are gathered in my name, I am there also. But God can do no great work because he's too busy having to fix us, because
can God go to a prison cell? Can
Absolutely.
God go into a hidden dungeon, and can God enter those spaces, in your opinion, into the hearts of us in any condition?
Absolutely.
At any time.
I was in my car at lunch at work, and the Holy Spirit met me there. He will meet you where you are, but he loves you enough not to leave you there.
So you speak to God. You talk outwardly. Do you feel like when you're doing that, did you ever look at yourself? And some people have this, like, am I okay? Because I'm having this and I have these real conversations, and it's like, have you ever felt like maybe it's just a little odd that you are speaking to this, your father, but you don't see him sitting next to you, right? So how do you kind of rationalize that? And I know I do.
It was weird at first. It was weird at
was.
first.
Okay.
But just as in any relationship, whenever you first begin to talk to somebody, it's awkward, it's unusual, but the more you get familiar with somebody, the easier it is to talk to them. So it's just the development of a relationship, just like any other relationship.
Maturity in your everyone's got a term, and it's interesting because you hear common terms used in different ways from Christians across the country and the world. Specifically, I like to think of my walk, using a term walk, as really just my relationship and my desire to walk like Jesus is really where I mean, I just want to love everybody. I automatically love my enemies, the people I couldn't, the first thing I want to do is go to those people that I feel like wronged me, and I want to love them. And that's weird, right? That's a weird feeling, because that switch that goes off in you, the day before you're ready to go out and have a throwdown in the woods, and then all of a sudden you got this love, and it's crazy because it fills your heart with it. And how did you react to that when that started to grow inside of you?
Well, I mean, I received it wholeheartedly, because it was love that I hadn't really ever felt before. And so I was glad to give it out as much as I could, because I wanted to tell everybody.
Did you feel more love for yourself, though? Because one of the things I try to tell people in my own walk is that love for myself was the first time I could look into my own spirit, my own soul, and say, wow, I love you.
Well, and so there was an aspect of that, but at the same time, I still understand that I am my righteousness and myself. I am as a filthy rags, but it's okay.
Right.
Yeah. So, I may be busted, but I'm okay, because he has made it okay. He has brought healing. to me.
Yeah, I don't mean to say love in a selfish like way, but a love of like opening that heart of saying, you know, finally, Kevin, I forgive you. Kevin, I know that you're doing this and you're on path. So when you're the blue collar conversationalist in a room full of intellects, I have a feeling you intellect a lot.
A few times.
Do you find it more of a challenge to discuss Christ, to discuss God with intellectual people?
Yes. Because a lot of times they're looking for empirical proof in a situation where they need faith. But if you point out their own double standard of how they have faith in their own lives in trivial things, then sometimes you're able to get through that veil of obscurity to actually get to the heart of things. I am going to have to cut this short.
No, wait, let's plan it for another. Can we do a round two?
Absolutely.
I'd love to do a round two. I really love the story, not the tragedies in the beginning, Colin. My heart, I'm going to definitely put you in my prayers tonight. But can you tell people where to find you, where they can check you out?
Absolutely. You can find me on Facebook at Colin Dillard, COLINDILLARD. My Instagram, where I usually post a lot of videos about singing. I'm singing on there, and I'll post stuff from Facebook, and they're kind of linked. That's BC_preacher. I do have a YouTube, but I don't really use it all that much, at least not right now. But it's BCP for life. It's on the picture. And then, of course, my email is colin.dillard.pastor@gmail.com. I welcome anybody to contact me for whatever reason. I am a pastor.
Thank you so much, Pastor Colin Dillard. And I will put you in the back room here. Get going, and we will reconnect. Mark will set you up I'd love to do another interview. In fact, I think you're going to be part of the family. I appreciate you coming on today. And there you go, folks. So I got to tell you that sometimes you get a chance to speak to somebody, and this is the beauty of sort of internet, right? Like we get this chance to reach out, and I know there's all the bad that we talk about often when it comes to how our lives are so different with technology. But I would never have met Colin if it wasn't for social media platforms and be able to stumble upon his word. And I hope you really paid attention to what he shared today, not just his story of the tragedies, losing his sister and his brother, and then his father right after that. But the walk that never wavered, the love that never wavered from God that was in Colin's heart the entire time, and he was able to persevere. I know someone out there right now is struggling. I know someone out there is suffering from something similar, maybe a loss of someone in your life. Maybe you're struggling from sort of, like myself, where sobriety is something that you battle with. Maybe you battle with mental health. These are all things that you can overcome. First and foremost, you need to reach out for that help today. And if you need help, scroll on down, send us a message, and we will find you help in wherever you are. So if we can help you, our network that we're building across the country is more than happy to do that. So make sure you send a message today. You don't have to feel like you're alone, and don't be hopeless. I hope you enjoyed this Be Better podcast. And we are on the Prayed Up Network. If you like what's going on the Prayed Up Network, and say you're out there and you have your own show, a platform that you're creating, let us know. Reach out to Mark. Scroll on down. Send an email to Mark, the producer, my partner, and we'll get you an opportunity to hear what it would be like to actually do your own show on the Prayed Up Network. We're actually going to be broadcasting many different content creators coming up in 2024. I hope you enjoyed this interview with our new friend, Colin Dillard. He's a cool